Hi guys, welcome to the chat. Hello. I think hopefully I signed on. Let me do some quick checking. Hopefully I signed on at the right time. I usually get a lot of you chit-chatting while I am, kind of making sure everything is connected and everything is going the way that it should be going. So I'm sure that wherever everyone else is, they will trickle over. But let me make sure that I listed the right time because I am known to sign on a little bit sooner than I say. So let me just make sure before I jump in. This topic, yeah, 6:25 p.m. So you guys should be ready to go. Signed on 10 minutes later. So and I'm going to recognize you guys because there's a couple of you that I see on here right now. But let me just briefly say this conversation could literally take about 2 to 3 hours in a course. So anytime I'm asked to teach any kind of higher education course or teach undergraduate students, this topic of how to deal with people who have personality disorders. Awesome. Thank you, Deb. Welcome to the chat, by the way. She's confirming that you guys can hear and see me. Hello, Mel Kep. Welcome to the chat. Just saw you sign on. And I just saw Alicia Riggs, Nancy Conway. Hello, welcome. And then also Raymond Garcia. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you guys. I'll acknowledge the rest of you in a second, but I want to complete this thought. That anytime I have had to do any kind of higher education course. My classes usually take a whole hour and 30 minutes to explain and to process and reflect upon, and then also to test students and to give them opportunity to present things and learn and ask questions. By the time this topic is over, it feels like we're at the end of a semester in the school, in college, and that's usually about 3 to 4 months. So it takes that long, just for me to discuss this topic, and for a lot of other therapists, this is a pretty heavy topic. The topic is, as you see in the title, it's how do you deal with people who have a personality disorder, and to me, that's one of the hardest things to try to deal with is a personality disorder. That's not to say that everybody that has a personality disorder is difficult. That's to say that there are some people who are really difficult and they are not willing to get help, and they are not willing, to adjust themselves to meet others' expectations or to do better. That's what we would call the treatment resistant group of people. They're like, no, I'm okay, I don't need it, and they're the ones who need it out of a whole room of people. So we have that group, and then we also have individuals who are diagnosed with multiple personalities, and that can make it difficult to try to manage the individual, right? Because, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit as we go along, that's like having an individual who has narcissistic personality disorder. That's complicated in and of itself, right, guys? And then on top of narcissistic personality disorder, you have borderline personality disorder and some avoidant personality characteristics. So there you've got three things going on, and that could make treatment of all three of those things really complex and difficult. So I'm going to pull this apart for you guys tonight just so that you'll have this information. And just so that you'll know kind of what you're looking at and how to manage the people in your own life. So I don't want you to take this live chat as I'm saying everybody with a personality disorder is difficult to manage. Just those categories of people, certain categories of individuals who have a personality disorder can be difficult. So, yeah, I saw you, Raymond. Raymond Garcia, welcome back. I also see it's been cold lately. Hello, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. Deb says, nice to know how rather than just running away, which is what I tend to do. Yeah. So she's saying, it may be helpful to really know how to manage somebody who has a personality disorder rather than run away and get away. I think our immediate reaction to somebody that has a personality disorder, and even myself as a psychotherapist, our immediate reaction is to run, right? Because we don't want to come up against something that doesn't look like it's going to budge, doesn't look like it's going to be easy to deal with, doesn't look like, it's going to be helped, right? We don't want to deal with people like that because it's going to weigh on us. And most of us don't like conflict. So, guys, so I totally agree with you, Deb. Totally agree with you. Okay, so let me jump into some of this, okay, while other people, trickle on over to from where they are, and sign on. Let me just jump into a few things I want you to keep in mind in tonight's live chat. The first thing that I want you to keep in mind, especially about personality disorders, and you're probably going to see this in family members more often, is healthcare utilization or using healthcare services is typically low. And research backs this, that people with personality disorders often struggle with healthcare utilization. They don't feel that they need it, and they also don't feel like it's going to help them. And so, therefore, they don't go. The only time an individual with a personality disorder gets psychiatric treatment is number one, if they are, profoundly affected, right? If they have some kind of issue that's really impacting their lives, they may go to therapy, they may get treatment. If they are court ordered and the judge says, in order to get A, B, and C, get off probation, get your kids back, divorce this person, the list goes on, be independent, you have to get treatment. So again, it's court ordered or something terrible is going on in that person's life. The other time is if, especially for a narcissist, if their relationships are being jeopardized and it's resulting in a very bad reputation, they may go to treatment just for that reason. It's not like, the narcissistic individual is just getting treatment because they feel they need it. There's often a motivator, and that is they want other people out there to see what they're like, to see what they're good at, to see them as strong, independent people. And if they aren't able to do that, then that's where they say, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm going to go get some therapy and learn how to be better. So healthcare utilization is low. The other thing is psychotherapeutic methods like counseling, EMDR therapy, group therapy, cognitive therapy. Those different kinds of therapeutic methods must be evidence-based, meaning it must be supported by research. We can't just say, hey, let's do some psychotherapy today and see how far we get, because, and I'll go over this again a little bit later, individuals who have a personality disorder, especially those who are of the narcissistic, antisocial arena, they have a certain way that they engage in psychotherapy, and it can really backfire on the therapist. Not only can it backfire on the therapist, but it's tiring. It's tiring. So we have to have research methods or treatment methods that have been backed by research and studied well in order to help individuals who have personality disorders. There is often more than one life-limiting issue as well with people who have personality disorders, meaning that there's what we call a comorbidity most times. And that's when the individual has, let's say, narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, but then they also have depression with suicidal thoughts, or they also have anxiety with OCD. So there's two or three or more things going on that is creating the issue, and it can make the issue a lot worse. The other thing I want you to keep in mind in tonight's live chat is there is often this inconsistent adherence to treatment. If they do go to treatment, those who have narcissistic tendencies, those who are antisocial, even avoidant personalities, if they do go to treatment, there's probably going to be some treatment resistance. As I talked about briefly at the beginning, there's this inconsistent adherence to treatment. Not in all individuals, but in some. And lastly, with people who have personality disorders, especially in cluster A, where they are paranoid, they're eccentric, they're just kind of on a little bit on the odd side, or with individuals who are narcissistic and antisocial, you're always going to feel that something is off with this individual. You may not be able to put your finger on it, but something is odd and off about this individual. It's just there under the surface, you know? So those are the things that I want you to keep in mind as I give you tools on how to deal with individuals who have personality disorders. Okay, so I see some people signing on here. Let me just make sure that I have all of you. Kane, Marco, hello. Welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, thank you for working with us tonight. I'm dealing with stalkers who won't go away. I'm so sorry to hear that, Kane, Marco. Stalking, unfortunately, is something that I don't think we as a society have gotten a grasp of yet. I feel like there's a lot of people who think stalking happens to those people over there, and it doesn't happen to them, and it doesn't happen to people who are in their, close, immediate group. I also think too that depending on whatever kind of stalking you're dealing with, and whoever the stalker is, can make things a lot more intense. So, very sorry that you're dealing with that. Let me just highlight too, for the rest of you and for you as well, Kane, Marco, that stalkers typically have a personality disorder. Now, a stalker could be in the cluster A range, and I'm going to post my video from last live chat in the description box so that you can see what cluster A is, cluster B, cluster C, all of that stuff, okay? But I'm just throwing this out here for a second, that those who are in cluster A, those stalkers, they're the paranoid, eccentric, odd group. They don't tend to have friends or connections that are intimate and close, just because of how they function. They kind of keep people out there because they're paranoid, or they don't know how to connect. Or they get better pleasure, I think, out of just being by themselves than they do being with other people. Those kind of individuals tend to become what we call incompetent stalkers, or intimacy seekers in stalking, meaning that they are desperate for a connection, but they just don't know how to get it. So what do? They stalk that individual that they want a connection to, and they do that often because that's the only way that they can connect with another human being without being judged, without being, rejected, that kind of thing, The incompetent stalker is also in the cluster A personality category, where they are odd, eccentric, paranoid. And these kind of stalkers, the incompetent stalkers, they make a ton of mistakes. That's the kind of stalker that watches you get out of your car and go into your driveway every night across the street with clear binoculars in the window, with the curtains wide open and the lights on in the background. Like, that is the incompetent stalker. So, Kane, Marco, I encourage you to check out some of my videos on stalking that I've done in the past, and my most recent ones. Thank you so much, Deb. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. I see your comment there. It's been cold lately. Hello, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you tonight. And also Cherry's Jubilee, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. Glad to have you. Oh, that's so great. It's been cold lately. It's talking about stalking. She says, I'm hiring an attorney. It's absolutely no joke. This channel has helped me so much. So glad to hear that. That's really wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's so sweet, Deb. You're so sweet. Says my tuition fee, clearly sliding scale. Oh, I appreciate that. You guys never have to do that, so I appreciate all of your contributions. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, let me make sure I have everybody. You guys are having a good conversation here, and I don't want to jump in and throw things off. Hi, Liberty Can. Welcome to the chat. So glad to see you tonight. Welcome. Yes, you're welcome, Kane. You're welcome. Okay, let me jump into the content, guys. I'm going to give you more content before I jump into this chat box and start talking more, okay? Now, let me give you some suggestions on how to deal with individuals who have personality disorders. But let me start with the definition of personality disorders. So a personality disorder is basically a set of characteristics that has formed into a complete whole over the person's lifespan, from infancy all the way to adulthood. It is a very chronic, pervasive pattern of behaviors that's hard to interrupt. Sometimes when I tell my clients that, they're like, what does that mean? Well, here's a different way to kind of think about it. Here's what it means. It's like that naturally funny person that, you know, you always laugh at because they are just that humorous, you can't change that, right? Everything they say has some twist of humor to it, and everybody just dies laughing, right? That's kind of like, you know, it's kind of similar to a personality disorder. You can't really change it. You can't throw it off. You can't really act like it's not there. You can't go around it. It is that person's chronic, pervasive pattern of how they are behaving. And that is why it's so hard to get these individuals into therapy. You know, it's like trying to get a humorous person into therapy. They're going to be like, well, why do I need it? I'm fine. I'm surviving. And that's basically what a personality disorder is. It kind of blocks the person's ability to kind of self-evaluate, you know? And unfortunately, that keeps them stuck, and it makes life hard on the rest of us. Now, let me just say too, cluster A, again, is that category, where there is paranoia, there's odd and eccentric behaviors. Cluster B is the narcissism, the sociopath, the borderline personality, the antisocial personality, I should say, not the sociopath. And it's kind of like cluster B is that irrational, impulsive, you know, inattentive, really quick to act, and sometimes grandiose set of personality traits, you know? Can you imagine, if you haven't had anybody like this in your space, in your family, you know, in your friend group, your work, whatever, can you imagine what life is like living everyday life with somebody who is grandiose? They are prideful, they are arrogant, they are impulsive, they are emotional, you know, they don't have the ability to pump the brakes and say, you know what, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to react that way. They're just kind of out there, you know. These individuals in cluster B, the borderline personality, the narcissistic, the antisocial, the histrionic personality, these individuals, usually you have to walk very careful in how you respond to them. And I'm going to explain that a little bit here, because you can either make matters worse or better depending on how you respond. Now, let me also say, I want to throw this out here, there may be some of you on the channel already who have been diagnosed with a personality disorder. And if that's the case, I would say this video, live chat, probably doesn't include you, because we're talking about individuals who are hard to live with, right? Which may be your mother, it may be your father, maybe your sibling, maybe your husband, your wife. This live chat is about those individuals who clearly make your life difficult, and you can't understand why they won't change, they can't change, or why medication isn't working, or why therapy is not working. The list goes on. Okay, so I want to make sure I throw that out there as a disclaimer. Okay, so we talked about cluster A, cluster B. Now let me just review cluster C with you. These are the kind of individuals who are fearful, they are avoidant, cluster C, they are anxious, you know, they are inhibited, they are dependent, they're avoidant, they're obsessive, compulsive. And these kind of individuals really do struggle with relationships, because, you know, for the dependent personality, they may connect and they may not know how to let go, though. And that can be the really bad part of who they are, right? Because they attach and then they don't know how to let go, and so they become codependent. So these kind of individuals are very anxious, they're very fearful, they don't know how to let go. There's also the obsessive compulsive. So they have these obsessive thought patterns, and it's so obsessive that it's almost like ruminating. And that means constantly thinking about the same thing over and over and over and over, and not being able to interrupt that train of thought or that obsession. And then there's the compulsion, meaning that they are doing something to reduce the anxiety that is caused by their ruminating and their obsessions. So these individuals in cluster C tend to be very anxious, very fearful, very obsessive compulsive. So there's kind of like a brief overview, a crash course on personality disorders from cluster A, cluster B, cluster C. Now, you may be wondering, okay, so now we have this information. How do we deal with these kind of individuals? One way that I encourage people to deal with the paranoid individual. So if you're dealing with somebody who is extraordinarily delusional, paranoid, inability to really test reality. They're not able to step back and process or intellectualize or rationalize. The first thing I encourage you to do is walk the line between truth and fiction really carefully. You don't want to validate the paranoia. You don't want to validate the delusion, and you certainly don't want to validate something that's not true, but you also don't want to disprove it, because if you outright disprove what they are feeling or thinking that they are experiencing, then you are invalidating their experience, right? And that in and of itself can trigger a whole cascade of issues. I'm sure I'm going to go to the chat box in a little bit here. I'm sure some of you have had that experience. The individual with a paranoid personality, or some kind of narcissistic personality, they believe a certain way. You don't agree, or you disagree, or you disprove it, or you say it's delusional, or you say you're paranoid, and boom, there's that person with the personality disorder ready to fight, become defensive, shutting down, refusing to engage. You've lost them, right? And the goal is not to lose the person. The goal is to protect yourself, and to get inside of their mind. And, I hate to put it that way, or get inside of their head a little bit and navigate them that way. But their defenses are going to be up if you disprove, if you say I don't believe you, if you say that this is not true, or something's wrong with you, or why are you always doing, it's that you, that's going to cause them to basically feel like you are attacking them and reducing the authenticity of what they think and believe. So don't argue with a paranoid personality, a delusional personality. It's just not worth it, right? You're going to lose credibility and legitimacy real quick. The other thing is, I encourage you guys, if you're dealing with somebody who's very defensive, angry, forceful, manipulative, triangulating, you really don't want to lose your focus on reality. These individuals, the ones who are manipulative, they're triangulating, they're paranoid, they're delusional, they're angry, they're impulsive, they're inattentive. These kind of individuals can really make you feel like you are crazy, for lack of a better word or a clinical term. And you don't need that, right? Because the minute you start to feel crazy, the minute you start to feel kind of detached from reality, is the minute that they win. So you don't want to let their stonewalling, refusing to talk to you, throw you off, their gaslighting, minimizing what it is that you are saying or feeling or thinking, right? And you also don't want them to flip the script. So you have to keep a grasp of reality yourself. You can't lose that. Now, with cluster B, personality traits, so the impulsive, the histrionic. Histrionic, I'm going to define briefly because it's hard to wrap your mind around their character sometimes. The histrionic individual tends to be very reactive, loud, theatrical, in your face, out in the open, loud, sometimes disrespectful and flamboyant. I once had a client who was histrionic personality, and I would have her in group therapy. And I'm coming to the chat box, so bear with me, guys, because I see you guys have comments and you're chatting. This was years ago, maybe 9 or 10 years ago, and I had a histrionic client who would use our group therapy, where she was in a group of at least 8 or 10 patients, and she would stand up, she would clear her throat and flip her hair and make sure her hair's in place. She would play with her hair all the time. And then she would take her glasses and take them off, and she would do all of this, as she stood up, and so we're all just kind of like waiting, like, okay, when are we going to get to your question or your comment? And so she was very theatrical in that sense. Like, all the attention had to be on her. She had to soak up all the attention. One thing my colleague did was absolutely wrong, and this is where I learned not to ever do this. Instead of kind of what we call it, it's a technique called rolling with the punches. It really, rolling with the resistance, that's the clinical term. And instead of doing that, rolling with the resistance, or kind of going along with her theatrical stance, or letting her have that 1 second of fame, my coworker pointed her out, pointed out what she was doing, minimized what she was trying to do, and then told her to take a seat. And the entire group therapy was thrown off. Like, it was crying and screaming and arguing and confrontation, and she hopped over a table ready to fight someone. Like, it was this really amped up emotional response, and I'm sure you guys have had that experience. I'm going to go to the chat box and see where you guys are with that. But this individual really was amped up and hyper and overstimulated, and it literally took us calling the police and having to restrain her that calmed her down. So she had this histrionic, overly dramatic, theatrical response to my coworker just saying, please take a seat. We don't need your theater. We don't need your attention seeking. We're tired of hearing this. That was the wrong approach, right? So for you guys, if you're dealing with a very emotionally explosive, high-tempered, hot-tempered, reactive, impulsive individual, right, who may be narcissistic, who may be antisocial, then what you want to do is respond carefully. You really want to figure out, how do I stay on the side of this individual and not make them feel like I'm going against them? Because it's not going to get you anywhere, right? So you want to ask yourself, what can I do to be on the side of this person? How do I validate their experience while also knowing that this absolutely makes no sense, right? I have a grasp of reality myself. I get that this is off completely, but how do I get that, right? How do I stay in tune with my connection to reality while also kind of, padding this situation and making sure that it turns out okay? That's the skill of a therapist, but I think you can do it as well. So respond carefully. The other thing is have proof ready. So let's say, for example, this is your mother. She's a narcissistic mother. She's highly emotional. She's toxic. She's flamboyant. She likes to get the neighbors involved in her chaos. She's gossipy. She's manipulative and triangulating. And so, this is your mom. You've understood over time that this is how she behaves. So let's say she starts accusing you of doing something against her. Let's say she's accusing you of taking her money out of the bank and spending it on other things, or maybe she's accusing you of poisoning family members against her. You want to be able to have some kind of proof that you can say, here's the proof right here. I once had a client who did that in session, and I thought, now this is good. I'll say the husband was having a hard time with his wife. The wife thought that he was having an affair, thought that he had emailed thousands of women on their shared email, and she wanted a divorce. She filed for divorce and accused him of having an affair. Well, what he did in one of our therapy sessions is he opened up his email account. He let her put the password in so she could see that it was the account that they both use. And he told her to go through his search history, and she could find absolutely no email that showed that he was having an affair. Because her accusation was, I bet you if I go on your email account right now, I'll see some emails that you sent some women. And that squashed it right there. When he showed her the email exchanges that he's had over the past year, and nothing included any strange women, it was all business transactions, the whole situation was squashed. So try to have proof when you're dealing with people with a personality disorder. Most individuals with a personality disorder are complicated, and sometimes they have characteristics that are hard to manage, meaning that sometimes they are very calculating, sometimes they are very emotional. They will spend sometimes hours upon hours upon hours of trying to get ahead of you. That's the narcissist. If it's an antisocial personality who's more on the higher end, which is a sociopath, then you have to keep in mind that these individuals play chess, okay? They don't play checkers, they play chess. And if you've ever played chess like I have, I play chess with my kiddos that come to see me for therapy almost every week. Some of those moves, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, what? How did I miss that? I'm like, I'm staring at this, how did I miss it? So some of these individuals who are antisocial, the ones who are more sociopath, psychopath, they play chess, right? So you almost have to learn how to be ahead of them. And sometimes having that proof to go against what they're saying about you or accusing you of is the way to go, okay? All right, so let me go to the chat box, then we'll come back. Oh man, I hit the wrong button. I do this every time. I really do. It's Been Cold Lately says, I'm not giving in to my stalker because they refuse to handle their obsession. They're trying to break me down and they will not. I lost my father right before this and haven't had a moment to grieve. It's been cold lately. I'm so sorry to hear that. Number one, loss can be so, so painful. Excuse me. And I don't think most people realize the pain of loss until they've experienced it. I know I've always been compassionate and loving, but it wasn't until I lost my dear loved one 3 years ago, it feels like yesterday, that I really, really, really understood what that meant. So I'm very, very sorry that you've had to face that. The other piece of this is it's been cold lately. You want to keep in mind that most stalkers have a personality disorder, and that's not to let them off. I had a comment last week from somebody. They said, I really don't appreciate that you mentioned that a stalker could have a personality disorder, because that's letting them off. It is not. A personality disorder, like I said, is a persistent chronic pattern of behaving. And it's really hard to disrupt a person's personality. It is who they have become over time. A personality disorder is a cross between three things: genes, right? Their biology, their environment, so what they experienced growing up, who they were connected to, and then the third part of this concoction of creating a personality disorder is this kind of miscellaneous category of other issues, like exposure to trauma, exposure to guns and violence, exposure to crime, exposure to domestic violence. So you've got genes and biology, environment, who they were around growing up, and then over here that miscellaneous category of other experiences. And all that kind of goes together and creates this kaboom, and there's that personality disorder, So keep in mind, it's been cold lately, that most stalkers have a personality disorder. Now, research suggests that most stalkers, and I'll post this in the description box for you below, most stalkers are sociopaths. Most stalkers are also psychopaths. They don't just stalk, sometimes they act. And so we would call these kind of stalkers predatory stalkers. And these are the individuals who will kill, they will rape or assault, they will destroy your livelihood as best they can. They will lie and cheat and create this big situation all around you. The predatory stalker is the individual that you never want to get involved with, because they don't fear consequences. They don't fear the repercussions of anything. They don't care if they go to jail for a long time. And they certainly aren't afraid of your threats to take them to the police. So it's been cold lately. You got to keep in mind that stalkers can be sociopaths, psychopaths. They can also be narcissists. They think they're important and powerful, but they typically have a personality disorder. That's what blocks their ability to understand that they are crossing a boundary. That's not to let them off the hook, though. Okay, let me keep going. I hope that was helpful. It's been cold lately. Okay, let me keep looking at the comments. Oh geez, not again. I have to show you how my side of everything works. Raymond Garcia says, my father-in-law used my wife for a therapist, projecting his issues onto her. She goes to therapy, comes back and expresses to her father what can help him. My wife said he has been doing this for years. Absolutely. So we would actually call that emotional incest. Now, that term in and of itself is risky. One time, my mom has her own YouTube life, she's not a YouTuber, but she likes to watch different videos, educational videos, religious videos, all that kind of stuff. And she was scrolling through and pops, here comes up my video. It pops up on her feed. And she's like, let me see. And the video that I had done is, maybe I can find it for those of you briefly who need to go watch that. I'll show you what the thumbnail is so you can just find it. And I will make sure to emotional. I will make sure to post this in the description box for you. But 1, 2, 3. So there are, I don't know if you can see this, but there are, oh, I hate that. I hate that. When YouTube plays the video. I don't know if it will, well, maybe. Okay, so this video right here, if you guys can see at the bottom, It's about emotional incest, okay? And it's a video called Do You Feel Lost and Used? My other video is How Do I Understand Emotional Incest? I'll post those in the description box for you. Those two videos highlight the negative impact that a parent can have on their child by using them as a therapist. This is for you, Raymond. By using them as a therapist, using them as a surrogate wife, using them as a parent of the siblings. For example, most parents who are, and I don't want to say this, but this is kind of backed by research, and I'll post this in the description box for you as well, that some parents who engage in emotional incest, they also have personality disorders, whether that's a borderline personality where they feel overwhelmed easily, they are impulsive, sometimes self-injurious, sometimes suicidal. There's these roller coaster moods. Sometimes there's splitting, right? Splitting is conceptualized differently depending on who you're talking about. But the kind of splitting I'm talking about is, splitting you as an individual. Like they see the good in you, but then they also treat you like dirt, or they treat you like you're bad or you're evil. There's a nice part, but then there's a bad part in their mind. So sometimes parents with borderline personality disorder, sometimes parents with narcissistic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder, they engage in emotional incest. That word is horrible. My mom scrolled through one of my videos and was like, oh my God, Tamara. I was, somewhere in the backyard, and she's like, what is this about emotional incest? The term is tricky, but really what it means is that parent is pulling you in to a dynamic that is incestuous, if I can say it. It's a crossing of the lines. It's a blurring of the lines, and the blurring is so intense that it is abusive. That's the best way I can put that. I hope that was helpful, Raymond. Okay, I'm catching up. Thanks so much, Kane. Kane Marco says, wish you had an office here in Myrtle Beach. Yeah, I do too. I would so not want to leave if I were in Myrtle Beach. That's so sweet of you. Thank you. Jen Green, hello. Welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, hello. Thank you so much for your channel. First time here. Yes, you're welcome. And welcome aboard. This is absolutely, so I like YouTube, okay? And some things I'll watch between crime scene investigation, movies, documentaries, things like that. Then I will do some gardening. I love gardening, so I'll do some videos on that. But then my channel. So let me just tell you, this is my favorite channel of all the other channels on YouTube. And here's why. You guys in the chat box make this channel so great and what it is. So Jen Green, welcome. Hopefully you will like the chat box and you'll like what you see. I'm glad you're here. All right, let me keep going. Henry Henderson, hello, welcome to the chat. So glad to see you. Says, who is the person with the disorder in the comedy analogy? Oh, I don't know. Do you guys know that show? Or that comedy? Because I'm not really big on that. I'm not. Some of my clients have mentioned this show, but I don't know because I haven't watched it. I feel embarrassed to say that, but I haven't. Somebody let me know if you know that show. Napalm 1334, hello, welcome to the chat. Says, great timing as always. That's so good to know. That means you're going to benefit from this live chat, so this is good. Chrome Butterfly, hello, welcome to the chat. Says, what is the self-esteem of both clusters? Do we mean, I'm not sure if you mean cluster A, cluster B, or cluster C, but let me just take a wild stab at this. Chrome Butterfly, that's a great question. The self-esteem of cluster B individuals, it really just depends on what diagnosis you're working with, right? Because sometimes the antisocial personality disorder, sometimes there can be self-esteem issues there because the individual is so antisocial, right? They may not think they're smart enough, attractive enough, social enough to really connect with other people. So they may have a lowered, kind of conceptualization of themselves, right? They may have a lower self-image. If you're dealing with somebody that has borderline personality disorder, self-esteem tends to be very low. And that's because, and research supports this, that's because of all the stormy relationships that someone with borderline personality disorder has. So there's four important components that I teach my clients about, that makes borderline personality a disorder that impacts your self-esteem. And the first part of that is the stormy relationships. It's that roller coaster series of relationships. It's not like this is a person that has had 2 or 3 bad relationships. We're talking about a lifetime almost of bad, rocky, stormy, tornado-like relationships. The second part of this is the impulsivity, which can lead to poor decisions, bad relationships, gambling, doing all kind of stuff like that. Then we have the self-injurious behaviors, which can be suicidal, but tend to be more, I'm going to cut myself, burn myself, or hurt myself in some way. And then we have the suicidal thoughts, which can make things rocky for other people. They're afraid you may act, right? Some people don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who's had suicidal thoughts that's, perpetual. And then the other piece of this is that dysphoria, that depressive mentality, that depressive state, that depressive personality sometimes. So individuals with cluster B personality traits, mainly borderline personality, has low self-esteem. And I would say antisocial and borderline personality, low self-esteem is usually in those two diagnoses. A narcissist definitely isn't struggling with self-esteem. They're not dealing with self-esteem issues. And somebody who's histrionic, it can be argued that they're suffering from self-esteem issues, but for the most part, they want to be on stage. That's why they act so wild and out there. Okay, I hope that made sense. Clarify to me if I missed that. That was a great question. Hi, Pam. Welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, so glad to catch you live. I love your videos. Thank you so much. I'm so glad. Welcome, Pam. Courtney Fraser, hello. You are not late. You're so sweet. Because every live chat, you're like, I'm late. No, you're not late. So welcome to the chat, Courtney. Glad to have you. Lisa Gortez. And you've been here forever and I still can't get your screen name. Forgive me, but welcome. I'm glad to see you tonight. Welcome to the chat. Ellie Wynn, hello. Welcome to the chat. So glad to see you tonight. Yeah. Napalm 1334 says triangulating drives me nuts. Yeah, me too. It's like, why are you doing this? I think I've talked to you guys about triangulation. And I don't know if I don't think I have anything with me right now to demonstrate triangulation, but kind of envision a triangle. For those of you who aren't familiar with this triangle, at the top of that triangle, there is a victim. On the left side, there's often a persecutor, which is the one who points fingers. And on the right side, there's often the rescuer, the one who says, I'm going to save you. And a manipulative person who could be the narcissist, it could be the histrionic personality, it could be the paranoid personality. The manipulative individual tends to claim that they are the victim. And they are being mistreated in some way, when the reality is that they're harming everybody else. But they claim that they're the victim. Then the victim tends to go to the rescuer and says, please help me. This person who's the persecutor is over here harming me. So that's the triangle: the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. I'll post some things so you guys will have this. Daryl Harris, hello. Welcome to the chat. So glad to see you tonight. Says, I promise I'll continue to fight. Thank you so much. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, guys, let me jump back into the content. I just saw somebody else that signed on. Thank you, Napalm 1334. Very, very glad. Jessica Rochelle, I'm going to say, forgive me, but welcome to the chat. So glad to have you tonight. Says, I've learned to either sit with my friend while she does things like that, or if it is too much, I will tell her I need to go. Yeah, you're probably talking about I'm guessing you're talking about an individual who is what, being manipulative, maybe suicidal, maybe self-injurious, that kind of thing. Clarify for me if that is not the case. Okay. Okay, let me keep focusing on the content. So let me go back to the content. I gave you some information, I think up to cluster B, right, on how to manage them. You want to have proof, okay? That's where we left off. The next thing that I suggest, if you're trying to deal with somebody who's a manipulator, who's emotional, impulsive, erratic, and maybe they're a little bit paranoid, manipulative, triangulating, I think it's okay to validate thoughts and feelings, but I would never validate behaviors. So you want to figure out how to do that. How do I say to somebody who's histrionic personality and is screaming so loud that the next door neighbor and the neighbor next to him can hear it, right? Or who is out in the middle of my street crying and cursing because she wants her letter mailed and I forgot to mail it last week. That's the histrionic personality. Sometimes they explode over small things like that. You know, instead of validating their behavioral reaction, that bad behavior, you want to validate their thoughts and feelings and then don't validate the behavior. So if this is happening in therapy and I have a client that's like this, usually what I'll do if the client is like, I'm out of here, and which rarely happens, thank God, but sometimes I will have a client who's really challenging and they say, you know what, I'm out of here. And they get up and stand up and then they continue to try to pull me into an argument while I'm calmly sitting there watching them behave badly. And, you know, they try to act, you know, like they have this power and they're arrogant and grandiose. The one thing that I do is I say something like, I understand how you're feeling. I understand how you could think that way. I would probably think and feel that way as well. Or I would say something like, you know, I've been there before. I've thought and felt that way before. That doesn't mean that I have to behave this way, though. And so then I engage them in a different way. So you may want to try that. Really what you're doing is stepping out of the argument. You're stepping out of the confrontation. You're saying that I'm not going to behave badly just because you are. I'm going to work with you cognitively and intellectually, and then hopefully the behavior will follow. So instead of getting into that muddy pig fight, if you will, with the individual who is argumentative and confrontational, you really can say, by stepping back within yourself, and you want to be able to exude that calmness, you know, because some people with personality disorders they're very people smart. They're very street smart sometimes, especially the narcissist, especially the sociopath or the antisocial personality. So you want to be able to be okay in here, right? Keep yourself grounded. But once you feel good within yourself, you can work cognitively and intellectually with that person. Validate their thoughts, validate their feelings, never the behavior. The other thing is you want to hold your boundary, right? So hold your boundary and be consistent. You wouldn't dare let somebody who is narcissistic control your mood for the day. You may also not want them to control or have any say in your life at all. So in order to do that, you have to set a boundary. Once you set a boundary with that narcissistic individual, keep it, right? Narcissists and antisocial personalities, sometimes even the histrionic personality, they like to see if they can budge the boundary, especially the malignant narcissist. Can I budge the boundary? Can I push up against this wall and get some flexibility in here? And you want to be that firm wall that says, it's not going to happen here. Here's how I'm going to deal with you, you know? That's the best way to deal with a narcissist. I am not going to budge. And I stay consistent with narcissistic parents that come into my practice. They try every way they can to try to budge me, whether it's showing up late, not showing up at all, you know, crying in session, trying to control how sessions go, whatever they may be doing. I stay consistent, and I've seen that has frustrated them to no end, right? Because most of society responds emotionally, or they get angry, or they budge the boundary. I don't, and so they can't stand that. So practice that. Keep the boundary, hold the boundary, be consistent. So let me give you some further tips on how to handle them. You know, I suggest, and this is number one, I suggest trying to figure out what you're dealing with. Try to figure out what it is that you're dealing with in terms of mood, attitude, behaviors. Am I dealing with a narcissist? Am I dealing with a sociopath? Am I dealing with somebody who's avoidant personality? What am I dealing with here? Sadly, because I'm going to contradict myself here in a minute. Sadly, you may have to go to your YouTube, your Google, and figure out, okay, what's the symptoms to this? What's the symptoms to that? But my next suggestion is not to Google. So I'm kind of contradicting myself here a little bit, but here's what I'm trying to say, and I'm going to clarify it. You want to figure out what you're dealing with based on what you're looking at visually, based on your experience. And I think it's okay to take your experience to Google and say, you know, I've had these kind of experiences. What am I dealing with here? Does it line up? That's okay, right? It's when you go to Google or you go to YouTube and you start searching up sociopath, and then you take that label from YouTube and Google and you say, there you are, you're a sociopath, you're a narcissist. That's the problem. It's okay though to say, here's my experience with this person, and it has driven me almost insane. So I'm going to take my experience and I'm going to put it into the Google search engine or YouTube, and I'm going to figure out what in the world is happening to me. But there's a problem, at least in my mind, there's a problem when you just go to YouTube and Google or Yahoo and you search up sociopath and then you say, yep, that's them, and tag them with it. You don't want to do that. That's going to change how you see them, how you interact with them, you know? And if you tell them you're a sociopath, that's not going to help either, right? So you really want to be careful with that. Let me give you an example. It's almost like therapists. We don't always tell our clients, our patients, what their diagnosis is. So sometimes we have to hold that information, and we can argue that that's unethical, but it really is the healthcare provider's judgment, right? So sometimes we don't divulge, we don't tell the client, the patient, what their diagnosis is, because if we sit there in therapy and say, you have narcissistic personality disorder, we may cause more damage than we really intended to. Or we may cause a situation that's unhealthy for me and the provider and everybody in the situation. So you don't always want to divulge what you know. So if you go online and you find something that makes sense, you might want to be careful in mentioning it. I would be careful throwing around, you're a narcissist, you act just like a narcissist. I would be careful with that, pull that back a little bit. If that's what you think it is, learn how to deal with it from that angle, but I would hold back on expressing that. I would also walk very carefully when you are having a confrontation with somebody with a personality disorder. I would avoid arguing. Don't try to reason intellectually, and I would also not match wits. It's not about that. It's really, how do I figure out how to get you to the place I need you so that we can kind of cooperate, communicate, click, whatever. Let's say, for example, you have a very narcissistic boss who loves to be praised. They love praise, right? What is the wise thing to do? Is the wise thing to ignore them and huff and puff every time they walk by? Or is the wise thing to say, you look nice today. You look nice today, boss. You know, or you did a really good job at that meeting. That's so honorable. I'm so glad. Now you may feel like, well, I'm not being honest. With certain narcissistic personalities, sometimes you can't be, right? So maybe the wisdom is found in, you did a really good job today. I'm so proud of you. Good for you. Pat them. Sometimes it's not wise to go against them and huff and puff and blow your eye, roll your eyes and look like, I'm sick of you. Okay? So that's just one suggestion there. The other thing too is you want to be patient with certain people who have personality disorders. The cluster C people, the people who are avoidant, they're dependent, right? They don't know how to let go. They are fearful, anxious. You want to be patient with them because they can actually go to therapy and get treatment and get better. So keep that in mind. Even individuals who have borderline personality disorder, they can go to treatment and get better. People who are histrionic personality, it's going to take some time. They can learn some skills, but they can also be healed. The paranoid personality, the antisocial, and the narcissistic personalities, they're a little tougher. So I'll post some information in the description box just so you have that as well. I also suggest something known as planned ignoring, planned ignoring. Anytime I have a overly narcissistic or a sociopath parent that is talking to me or coming to therapy with their kid, or if I'm dealing with an adult who's a sociopath, every session I plan to not ignore what they are saying, but sometimes I have to plan to ignore something that they may do in the session. I once had a very arrogant client. This was about 5 years ago, and he would talk about he was a manager. He was a manager, and he was running for mayor in our city. And he was telling me a lot of personal information about a variety of people that I knew in a school district, and I was just sickened by what he was telling me about these individuals. But one thing I realized in that conversation is I needed to learn how to gain control of my own emotions. And the way I did that is planned ignoring. Every single session, I planned to ignore his arrogance, his pride, his pompousness, if that's a word, his disposition, all of it. I planned to ignore. That was my weapon of choice. Planned ignoring. All right, let me go to the chat box really quickly, and I'm gonna see what you guys are talking about. I'm going to give you the last 3 suggestions, and we're going to say goodnight. I'm way over time. Above average and the best. Oh my goodness, look at that screen name. Hello, welcome to the chat. So glad to have you. Says, to be honest, I just can't be bothered to try playing games with these people. I just block and ignore. Yeah, sometimes you do have to, right? I've had some comments on my channel where I'm like, narcissist. As a therapist, at this point in my career, 15 years doing this, I don't really need much information. I know what you are. So sometimes I'll get comments and, they sound narcissistic, delete. Sometimes I'll get comments and they're attacking some of you who are regulars on my channel, delete. We don't need this, and so sometimes I will just block and delete above average and the best. Sometimes that is wisdom. My mom used to tell me a scripture all the time. It's a scripture that says, when a man foresees trouble, he hides himself. And that makes sense. Sometimes you can't address it. Sometimes you just need to get out. Block, say no, right? Just say no. Jen Green says, could you talk about when the person with BPD attempts suicide, the effects on the partner? It's like a death each time. They split and sometimes don't even remember much. Yeah, I'll briefly talk about that. I'm over time, but I'm going to try my best to make this small or brief. I have a video on my channel called Failed Suicide Attempts, and I talk a little bit about, maybe I'll post it in the description box. I talk a little bit about what goes on in the process of failing, having successfully committed suicide. I'll put it that way. I'm trying to use the right lingo here. That's a little jumbled up. But for those who have completed a suicide, they leave behind such grief and loss with the family members. That's a whole new live chat. But briefly, let me just say the impact of somebody with a borderline personality disorder attempting suicide can be very devastating. Here's why. Sometimes an individual with a borderline personality can seem, and I think this is why sometimes they're considered split personalities by just lay people. Sometimes they can be really happy. They can seem really well adjusted. They can seem really engaged, really wonderful, really happy, really okay. Yeah, really okay, for lack of a clinical term. And in that same breath, they could want to die still. In trying to understand, how is it you're laughing, you're smiling, you're happy, you're wonderful, your energy is amazing, and yet under the surface you still want to complete suicide. You still want to be successful at taking your life. And so that back and forth, I hope I'm getting to this, to what you're asking me, Jen Green. That back and forth of 1 minute you're this way, next minute you're that way, that is traumatic, okay? And especially for a parent, and especially for a partner, a husband, a wife, and even for a child, right? When I used to treat borderline personality disorder, I didn't treat it long because I burned out, to be very honest. I didn't treat it long. So this was maybe 5 years into the field. I was still a baby. I had my first 3 patients, clients with borderline personality, and I had to get tons of supervision because they were difficult. At the end of every session, they would bring something terrifying up, and we didn't have enough time to go over it. And that was a pattern. You know, this individual who laughed with me for a whole 60 minutes, who seemed happy, who seemed well adjusted, who seemed engaged, who seemed, calm and balanced. We spent a whole 60 minutes. So from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, we talked. Now we're trying to schedule the next appointment. And that client says, oh, by the way, I tried to kill myself last night. That just spins the whole encounter out of control, because it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with this information? And we're over time, you know? And so sometimes that back and forth from somebody with a borderline personality can be really draining. I hope I touched on that appropriately for you, Jen. I'll come back to that at some point on this channel. Cherry's Jubilee, I see you commenting, and I have not been ignoring you. I promise. I just have to catch up to what you're saying, and then I'm going to mention you. D, hello, welcome to the chat, says, I wonder what his disorder was until this day. So let me go back. You're talking about, you said, when I told my therapist about the guy I dated who assaulted and then stalked me after, she always said he was cunning because he was so calm and collected. He's a data analyst and had a girlfriend the whole time. D says, I wonder what his disorder was until this day. Well, let me just call him a psychopath. So a psychopath is an individual who can have all of that going on over here, strategically hold that while strategically bringing you in at the same time. So a psychopath is really an individual who is methodical, they are strategic, they are highly intellectual, they are intelligent most of the time, and they are people smart. These are the Ted Bundys. They're handsome, or they're beautiful, and they're smart, and they're really quick thinkers. They're not clumsy. They can trace their steps. They can hide a whole life over there while they're with you. So D, I would say, maybe this individual was a narcissist personality disorder, a narcissistic personality, but they could also just be a psychopath. And that's different, of course. I would say a psychopath. Light Ink Z Productions, hello, welcome to the chat. I'm sounding off, but welcome to the chat. I'm way over, guys. Yeah. Light Ink Z Productions says, I'm here to learn, to be mentally ready to deal with mentally unstable people. Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you. So I can outsmart them and stay safe. Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, the narcissistic personalities, the histrionic personalities, the antisocial personalities, sometimes you do have to figure out how to outsmart them. And the tips I gave you in this video, including planned ignoring, are tools. They are practical ways that you can deal with these kind of individuals. I have 3 more that I want to give you, and then we're wrapping up. Okay, I just saw what you said, Liberty Can. Hold on. Liberty Can says, the goal of happy and healthy and balance. You can get caught up in rivers or reactive stalking as like reactive abuse when you start buying into the game. Just go no contact and keep focused. Yeah. So let me highlight what you just said there. You can start buying into the game, or you can just go no contact and keep focused. I agree. So if you know that you're in a situation with a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath and you're not going anywhere, backpedal, get out of that, because you're not going to go anywhere. They like games, and they love the attractiveness of the game. Like I said, they play chess, not checkers. Narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths. Okay. Yes, you're welcome. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's been cold lately. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, I love what I'm seeing. Okay, let me give you the last 3. Okay, guys. So we left off at planned ignoring. The last 3. Here's what I want you to also keep in mind: that you are dealing with people. If you have people in your world who fit all of the things we talked about tonight, you have to keep in mind your own mental health. There's a reason I burned out years ago. After maybe 5 years of higher education and 5 years of working in the field, I had to at least take 1 entire year off. And it's because my own mental health needed it. So if you're dealing with people who fit all the characteristics we talked about tonight, my suggestion is to try to get your own therapy, try to get your own knowledge, your own information, do some mindfulness, do some yoga, some meditation, go to the gym, listen to podcasts, become more educated about this, try to get better sleep, right? Take supplements for, increasing your energy a little bit. Engage in some things for brain health, eat better. If you're not a big person into therapy, maybe try some mentorship, find a coach, a life coach, whatever. Because when you're in this battle with a personality disorder that's not easy to shift or change, you want to have the strength to do it. And so if you're feeling weak and vulnerable yourself, right, you can't fight this battle. I need to take my own advice. The other piece too is don't allow burnouts, because once you get burned out, you're not going to be able to deal with the personality disorder. You will find over time that you kind of let things in that you shouldn't, right? Because you get tired of fighting. So it's like a narcissistic father who crosses your boundaries. Maybe for the first 5 years you were up on your boundaries and you were consistent and you never budged, but now you're burning out, and so now you allow him to come over without calling you. Now you allow him to text you at 6 a.m. talking about his girlfriends. Now you allow him to come over to your house and keep you up all night. Because the more burned out you get, the less you want to fight. So be careful with that, guys. The other piece is learn about compassion fatigue. You can experience it. You will find online that compassion fatigue is more so for healthcare providers, therapists, who are almost drained because they care so much. But you may find some benefits in learning about compassion fatigue, because if you are dealing with somebody who has borderline personality disorder and they are extraordinarily dysregulated and they are attempting suicide, they are cutting themselves, they are manipulating, or it appears like they are manipulating, that drains your energy, right? So learn about compassion fatigue. You can really feel that. You can. And lastly, I just want to encourage you to choose your own battles. Like sometimes it's just not worth going to bat with the personality disorder. It is a chronic, pervasive pattern of how this person has learned to be. And so, you're not going to be able to change it overnight. You may not even ever be able to change it. But what you need is stability and balance for you. So keep that in mind. All right, that is all the tips I have, guys, for right now. Let me just make sure that I wrap up by acknowledging you guys. Oh, it's been cold lately. That's so sweet. It says, Tamara, do you have a P.O. box or an email? I would love to send you a holiday card if possible, just to thank you. Oh, that's so sweet. Look in the description box. I have my email address and I also have my P.O. box there. So anybody that needs to contact me, feel free. You're so sweet. It's been cold lately. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Oh my God, Sherry's Jubilee. I'm sorry to hear that. That you're fighting insurance. Oh God, insurance is a headache sometimes. Jamar Vegan. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I'm so sorry, but welcome to the chat. Glad to see you. Says, I'm new. What is it all about? Break that down for me, Jamar, before I go off. What do you mean? Do you mean what's the chat all about, or what's this whole topic all about in terms of what does all of this mean? Let me know, okay? I'm signing off in literally 5 seconds, 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Jen Green says or asks me, does compulsion create addiction, or the other way around maybe? Jen, it could be the compulsion can cause addiction to something. So if we're talking about like obsessive compulsive disorder, like OCD, you have that obsession, which might be, not walking on the cracks in a sidewalk. Your compulsion is something that you do to reduce that anxiety. So you may do something like smoke marijuana to reduce that anxiety. That can become addictive. You could, in some way, you could, say that I'm tired of checking and rechecking and checking the locks on my door. So because of that, I'm going to take some pills to try to calm my nerves, and that can become addictive. So yes. Yeah, that's the short answer. That's the short answer. Oh, okay. Okay, Chrome Butterfly, thank you for that. Yes, of all clusters can have self-esteem issues, absolutely. But they are more common with borderline personality, antisocial personality, avoidant, dependent. So keep that in mind. But yes, Bud Happy, Marvin Spaz, hello, welcome to the chat, says, I have an ex who I think is a borderline. What is the best way to convince him to leave me alone for good without him getting dramatic or angry? He's been showing up everywhere I go lately. Yeah, well, here's the thing. If you're dealing with a borderline personality disorder, you don't want to ruffle feathers, right? Because people who have that disorder and they are dysregulated, meaning they can't control their impulses, they can't control their emotions, they are not medicated or poorly medicated, you don't want to ruffle their feathers. So I would slowly back away, right? Slowly block this person. And you may have to hold the boundary very firm and be consistent. I would also explain to this individual, if they continue to stalk you or continue to put fear in you or something, I would make it very clear that if you don't stop, you will have to deal with the law. And that's something that they don't want. You can also threaten to put them in the hospital against their will, right? Because you can always call the police and be like, I have a sick person here. They are not okay. They have borderline personality disorder. They have threatened to kill themselves if I don't, give them access to me, whatever. You can go ahead and call 911 and say, please do a wellness check. It's called a wellness check. Or you can say, please send a crisis team. This individual needs to be hospitalized. Sometimes you have to put that boundary in place. I hope that was helpful. That's the short answer. Joshua and Anzalon, hello, welcome to the chat. I hope I said that correctly. Says 3 years of dealing with obsessive stalkers through hacked and cloned phone. Oh my. Yeah, again, some stalkers, they have personality disorders. You're welcome, Chrome Butterfly. You're welcome. Thank you, Jen Green. It is, I feel like I'm frozen. Am I frozen, guys? Maybe I am frozen. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I really don't. I have no clue. Okay. I'm gonna put, am I frozen? My screen is frozen. Hopefully it's just on my end. I don't know. What? Okay, I don't know. Okay, I really don't know. Am I frozen? Am I not frozen? What? Okay. All right. We're gonna call it a quits. Okay, guys. Yes, you're welcome, guys. Okay, okay. Go back and read. Okay, absolutely. I will. I will. I will. Oh, I hate the frozen part. I have no idea what just happened. All right, guys. I love you so much. Thank you so much. I don't know what to do. Audio is still working, Deb says. So thank you so much, guys. I'm sorry that this froze. I have no idea what just happened. Um, oh, Jessica says there's no problem. Jacob Taylor says this happens. Yeah, it does. I don't know. YouTube hates me. Um, I love you guys. Have a wonderful night. I'll see you next week, okay? No video on Sunday. I need to rest. But I love you guys so much for your support. I hope this was a very, very helpful live chat for you. I'll see you soon. Make sure you comment, ask me questions because I am checking the comment section. All right, guys, have a good weekend. Bye bye.